Fire is one of those careers where there's a lot of mental and physical stuff that you have to deal with, like you said, the pediatric calls or the MVAs or those sort of things. How do you and your colleagues deal with that? Like to make sure that the trauma doesn't get to you?
Well, so on an outside, that's where we, like department wide, that's where we lean on our peer support team, right? So in 2002, we had a very tragic event where one of our firefighters passed away in the line of duty, very young man, um, to a just a freak accident on, with some equipment at work. It wasn't even necessarily on a call.
Mm.
And that's the only time, in the history of me being there, and for those that have been there for a lot longer than me, that they've ever seen or dealt with anything to that magnitude. So that was a very eye-opening experience to where we needed to move forward and progress more. Also, in taking care of our firemen further, we were more reactive than proactive when it came to being a peer support team. We had a lot of things that were ahead of the game because there was a lot of departments at that time that didn't even have peer support teams, or those trained in critical incident stress management, or things of that nature, chaplains, so on. So after that, we really took a very proactive approach after being reactionary to that
Mm-hmm.
event, to say, okay, we need to really get some stuff set up and ready to go for our guys. God forbid they have to deal with this again. So we have two chaplains now. We also have a licensed clinician on that, we as like a contract, and so she's there for everybody as well. We're really working to set up a more structured peer support team to be there for individuals, and we're part of a program here in Florida called the Behavioral Health Collaborative. And so what that is essentially a group of individuals from departments all over the state that have that are IAFF certified in peer support, that can respond to departments when they have such a tragic event, which we did.
Mm-hmm.
So we had members, and it was different because I've been on those deployments to go to other departments, but it was different having them come to us now.
Yeah.
So they came to us to do, to really sit down with us. And none of us are licensed clinicians by any mean, but we have gone through the basic fundamentals of peer support.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, if you ever get to a point where it's beyond the scope of just having these, you know, surface, partially subsurface, conversations with individuals, and they are just going to need more help, then it's like, okay, what resources do you then have after that?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing that we started gathering. Where's the resources available to say, okay, no matter what you may be dealing with, we want to create an umbrella of resources. So that way, whatever is going to be necessary for you as an individual, because not everybody's the same, we have that ability to offer that. So just in our department, we have a therapy dog program. We have a peer mentoring program. We have chaplains. So we have, and then we have our licensed clinicians. So we have a lot of different avenues, whether you're faith based, not faith based, doesn't matter. We have a lot of different pieces under our umbrella of peer support. So when you start dealing through these things, we have those resources. And then we obviously then have the connections to the outside resources as well. So if it does go beyond that, if you want to do something that's separate from our department, because that's the biggest fear, right? Is that a lot of individuals think that if it's anything connected to the department, that everybody's going to know.
Mm-hmm.
And although that's not true, because it happened way in the past prior to us really establishing all of this, then they just have this fear.
Mm-hmm.
And we get it and we understand. So that's why it's like, all right, well, for those that do have that issue, then let's be proactive in having outside resources.
Yeah.
On a personal level, for me, obviously being a strong man of my faith, I have a very, very strong um, circle of confidants that I have had for majority of my life through relationships built within the church.
Mm.
And then obviously, I've been married for the last 11 to my beautiful wife, and she is just a great support system no matter what happens at work. So in having, those relationships in the department, those really strong, spiritual leaders and confidants outside the fire department, and just my own personal relationship with the Lord, I that's how I'm able to process through those things. Yeah, the longer that you've been doing the job and the more that you see those things, you become a little bit more desensitized to them, a little bit less emotional attachment to those particular calls. But at the same time, it's like, okay, um, it's not always necessarily healthy. So you have to just make sure that you're processing through everything the right way. And that's our biggest thing that, from the very beginning, I do a peer support presentation with our new hires on like day 2 of their orientation to just give them the runaround or not runaround, but the run of the mill of what happens and what can happen and how you process it. And to let them know, hey, your first day, you could run a pediatric code.
Mm-hmm.
Your first day, you could run we had a pediatric extrication. We've had a couple of those the last couple of years. So it's like your first day, you could do that, and you're going to come back and you're going to be shell shocked. You're not going to necessarily know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna go through this, and it's not going to be your favorite conversation that you have during orientation. By far, it's not going to be the most fun, but this is important because you are going to see this. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, if you're doing this job for long enough, and how you process through it. Because in 20 or 25 years from now, when you decide to retire, if you plan to make a full career out of this, then we want you to be mentally healthy,
Yeah.
right? Because right now, especially when it comes to first responder suicide is much more than line of duty death,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me at our department, when we started the peer support team years ago, it was for me doing presentations, taking fire officer classes, where it really dawned on me at that point years ago that this was like an epidemic,
Yeah.
that, PTSD and suicide was always more prevalent and put a bigger focus when it comes to military. But it was like, wow, there's not a lot that's going on right now within the realm of first responders, firefighters and so on. And, and they're not the numbers aren't being recorded very well, but you can see it's becoming a problem. And then more and more as individuals, that are, very, that are involved a lot more, within those different programs, the AFF and so on, when they start to actually record things and get the numbers and follow through and gather statistics and so on, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy,
Yeah.
how much the everyday life of running these calls, impacts you as a first responder. So we don't take that for granted. And that's why, we do the best that we can to be there for anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the night. Me and a couple of other guys or girls that are a part of our team, we respond to these stations. We call the station officers, find out how they're doing. Have you discussed anything? Have you debriefed with them? But yeah, I've certainly taken off at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning when I get the phone call. Hey, just to let you know, station so and so and so and so just had a really bad pediatric code or a drowning or an extrication or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, let's go at it. Let's make sure that these our guys, our girls, these are our people are okay.
Yeah. I think that's great. There's
Yeah,
just having all of these support systems, the chaplains, the therapists, and all of the people being able to have your inner circle and just everyone to talk to. I think I would imagine that in previous decades and such, this just wasn't something that was addressed, and
right.
inevitably it still haunted people, and people still had
Yeah.
PTSD, first responders, because a pediatric code is a pediatric code no matter who you are. So it's good to hear that more is being done to address this, and that
Well, the fire department's paramilitary, right? So way back in the day and for many, many years, that's how it was run. So you weren't allowed to have tough feelings. You weren't
mm-hmm.
allowed to deal with things in an emotional way. So there was this that everybody calls it that way. So it's this suck it up, buttercup,
Mm-hmm.
mentality, where keep it to yourself. Nobody wants to hear it if you're struggling and going through a hard time with a call. Like what you signed up for. This is the nature of the beast. So on.
Yeah, it's that
And
whole like
so
you need to be a man and just
right.
be stoic
So
about
it
it.
was a lot to change that culture, but
Mm-hmm.
fortunately, with so many departments around the country, and so many different organizations finally realizing that and coming to that mentality, not every department does, but fortunately, our upper administration, they bought into it as well. And because that's where it starts, is from the top down. So if
Mm-hmm.
they buy into it, then the culture can change because obviously they make the final decisions for things.
Yeah.
So fortunately, that is our case. Is that in seeing the numbers and seeing the impact, going through our own tragic, event a couple of years ago ourselves, they heavily bought into it and are very supportive in all of our endeavors. Peer support was.
Yeah. I think it's really good to see this shift culturally towards like being able to talk about emotions and being able to talk about what's going on in your life and not have it be this stigmatized thing, and also not having it be this thing where you just kind of wallow in your emotions, but a much more thought out method of talking about emotions and working through them and actually learning what is going on inside of your head. Because the issue with the whole stoic, I'm going to go to my cave and just sit there and brood, is that's just you. And it's really hard to process what's going on in your mind if you don't
Hmm.
have the proper tools. But being able to be open about it and find what those tools are through conversations is really
Yeah,
a good shift that I think I'm seeing more and more.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.